Ava Ingrid stepped into the pristine steel kitchen of the Château Bellmont, with nothing but a worn chef's bag and hands that had wielded far deadlier instruments than the gleaming knives arranged before her. The prestigious Culinary Academy stood as Europe's most exclusive training ground for elite chefs, its marble halls echoing with the pretentious chatter of wealthy students who saw cooking as an art form rather than survival. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She adjusted her simple black apron, no embroidery, no prestigious culinary school logos, nothing to hint at the 12 years she'd spent in covert operations before her records were sealed and her identity quietly reassigned to what her handler called domestic placement. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Château Bellmont's grand entrance as Ava signed her name on the staff registry. The receptionist, a thin woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, barely glanced up from her computer screen as she slid a basic staff identification badge across the marble counter. "Kitchen assistant orientation is in the service wing," the woman said with practiced indifference, her French accent dripping with the kind of superiority that came from working at Europe's most elite culinary institution. "Support staff don't have access to the main teaching kitchens or student dining areas." Ava nodded silently, clipping the badge to her plain black uniform. She didn't correct the assumption about her role. Her assignment here wasn't something she had requested or expected. 3 months ago, she had been leading classified operations across Eastern Europe, dismantling weapons trafficking networks that threatened continental security. Now, after a controversial mission in Prague that had been buried under layers of classified documentation, she found herself reassigned to Château Bellmont through what her intelligence handler had described as strategic repositioning, the agency's polite way of placing a burned asset where she could still be useful. The main corridor stretched before her like a museum of culinary excellence, its walls lined with photographs of famous graduates standing beside world leaders, Michelin-starred restaurants, and gleaming trophies from international cooking competitions. Ava walked past them with measured steps, her reflection ghosting across the polished surfaces. To anyone watching, she appeared to be nothing more than another support staff member, perhaps hired to prep vegetables or clean equipment in the service kitchens. What they couldn't see was the way her eyes methodically cataloged every detail. The layout of emergency exits, the security protocols at each checkpoint, the positioning of cameras, and most importantly, the subtle architectural features that only someone with her background would recognize. The chateau wasn't just a cooking school, it was a fortress designed to protect something far more valuable than culinary secrets. She wasn't here to prepare gourmet meals. She was here to observe and investigate a network that had been using the Academy's international student exchange programs to move something far more dangerous than exotic ingredients across European borders. The service wing bustled with activity as kitchen staff prepared for the day's lessons. Servers in crisp uniforms moved between prep stations, their conversations a mixture of French, English, and German as they discussed menu planning and ingredient sourcing. The air smelled of fresh herbs and expensive truffle oil, underscored by the constant hum of industrial refrigeration units and the rhythmic sound of knives on cutting boards. A tall man with graying temples and the rigid posture of someone accustomed to absolute authority approached her station. His chef's coat bore the distinctive gold embroidery of the Academy's senior faculty, and his eyes carried the calculating assessment of someone who viewed the kitchen as his personal kingdom. "This area is restricted to qualified culinary staff," Chef Henry Dubois announced, his voice carrying the kind of authority that brooked no argument. "Assistant positions are limited to basic prep work in the service areas. I have level 2 clearance for ingredient procurement and inventory management," Ava replied, her voice neutral and deferential. Her documentation was flawless, any deeper. Investigation would hit the same classified barriers that protected her true identity. Dubois studied her with thinly veiled skepticism, noting her plain uniform and the absence of any prestigious culinary credentials. "What exactly is your background?" "Miss Ingrid." "Basic culinary training and supply chain management," she offered, maintaining the calm, slightly submissive demeanor expected of support staff. Her paperwork indicated nothing more than competent food service experience, carefully constructed. To explain her presence without revealing the extensive training that made her far more dangerous than any chef in the building, he held her gaze for a moment, before nodding curtly. "Stay within your authorized areas. The students are preparing for their final examinations, and we don't need distractions." Ava continued toward the service kitchen, noting how Dubois's reaction confirmed one of her initial assessments. Academy operated on rigid hierarchies that discouraged questioning and maintained clear separation between different levels of staff. It was exactly the kind of environment where illegal activities could flourish under the cover of legitimate operations, protected by institutional arrogance and deliberate blindness to anything that didn't fit the expected patterns. The service kitchen occupied the basement level of Château Bellmont, a world away from the gleaming teaching facilities upstairs, where wealthy students learned to craft molecular gastronomy and perfect their knife techniques. Here, industrial-grade equipment hummed constantly, processing the massive quantities of ingredients required to feed the Academy's population of elite culinary students and distinguished faculty. Ava was assigned a workstation near the walk-in coolers, ostensibly responsible for inventory management and basic food preparation. The position provided perfect cover for her actual mission, mapping the flow of goods through the Academy's supply chain and identifying the irregularities that had triggered her assignment here. She organized her tools with methodical precision, each knife and utensil placed exactly where her muscle memory expected to find them. To casual observers, she appeared to be nothing more than an efficient prep cook arranging her workspace. What they couldn't see was the way she mentally cataloged the kitchen's layout, noting potential weapons, escape routes, and defensive positions. With the same attention to detail she brought to arranging vegetables. The morning shift began with the arrival of ingredient deliveries trucks bearing the logos of prestigious European suppliers, bringing everything from Italian truffles to Norwegian salmon. Ava watched the process with professional interest, noting the security protocols and documentation requirements for each delivery. Most followed standard procedures, but certain shipments received different treatment: expedited processing, minimal inspection, and direct routing to secure storage areas that didn't appear on any of the facility's public documentation. "New girls very observant," commented Marcel, a sous chef with 20 years' experience at the Academy. He spoke quietly to his colleague while organizing their mise en place, unaware that Ava's hearing had been trained to isolate conversations from ambient kitchen noise. "Watches everything like she's taking inventory of more than just vegetables." "Dubois thinks she's too curious for basic prep work," the other chef replied. "But her paperwork cleared security, so what can he do?" There, conversation confirmed that her presence had already attracted attention, though not yet suspicion. She would need to be more careful about her observation patterns while still gathering the intelligence that had brought her to Château Bellmont. The Academy's layout matched the architectural plans she had memorized before arrival, but spending time in the building revealed details that blueprints couldn't convey. The service elevators connected to areas not shown on public floor plans. Certain storage rooms required biometric access that seemed excessive for food storage. Most telling were the refrigerated areas that maintained temperatures far below what any culinary application would require, temperatures suitable for preserving materials far more sensitive than even the most delicate ingredients. During her lunch break, Ava carried her meal to an empty table in the staff cafeteria, a utilitarian space far removed from the elegant dining rooms where students and faculty took their meals. The conversation around her provided valuable intelligence about the Academy's operations, revealing patterns and relationships that weren't apparent from official documentation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A group of senior kitchen staff settled at the adjacent table. Their discussion focused on upcoming changes to delivery schedules. The Prague route has been discontinued, one mentioned casually. Too much scrutiny from customs officials. Everything's being rerouted through Amsterdam now. The Prague reference made Ava's pulse quicken slightly. Her final mission in that city had disrupted a weapons trafficking network that used food service companies as cover for moving illegal materials across borders. If Château Bellmont was connected to that operation, her assignment here represented more than random placement. It was a continuation of work that had supposedly ended with her reassignment. She continued eating without reaction, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts while her mind processed the implications. The Amsterdam route suggested a sophisticated network, capable of adapting quickly to law enforcement pressure, shifting operations to maintain continuity rather than shutting down when exposed. As afternoon prep work began, Ava found herself assigned to assist with inventory in the Academy's main storage areas. The task required accessing the secure facilities she had observed during morning deliveries, providing her first opportunity to examine the irregularities that had brought her here. The storage areas were organized with military precision, far exceeding what any culinary operation would require. Inventory lists were maintained in multiple languages, using coding systems that seemed unnecessarily complex for food products. Most concerning were the sealed containers stored in the lowest temperature units, marked with symbols that had nothing to do with culinary applications. Her examination was interrupted by the arrival of Chef Dubois, who appeared in the storage area with the sudden silence that suggested deliberate stealth rather than casual inspection. His expression carried suspicion mixed with growing irritation as he observed her detailed examination of inventory systems. "Miss Ingrid," he said carefully, "your duties don't require such thorough analysis of our storage protocols." Ava turned slowly, maintaining the neutral expression of a conscientious employee. "I was ensuring proper rotation procedures for temperature-sensitive items. Some of these storage requirements seem unusual for standard ingredients." Dubois stepped closer, his professional demeanor hardening around the edges. "Our inventory management follows protocols established by the Academy's administration. Your role is to follow procedures, not question them." She nodded compliance while noting the defensive reaction her observations had triggered. Someone with Dubois's experience would know that her questions were legitimate from a food safety perspective, which meant his hostility suggested awareness of irregularities he preferred to keep hidden. As the first day concluded, Ava had confirmed her initial suspicions. Château Bellmont was serving as more than a culinary academy. The sophisticated security measures, unusual storage requirements, and defensive reactions to reasonable questions all pointed to an operation that required her continued investigation. But she had also confirmed that her presence was generating attention among the staff, attention that could compromise her mission if she wasn't more careful about maintaining her cover while gathering the evidence that would expose whatever illegal activities were hiding behind the Academy's prestigious reputation. Ava's second week at Château Bellmont began with the arrival of a coded message hidden within routine supply documentation. The communication appeared as nothing more than an inventory adjustment for Hungarian paprika, but the specific quantities and delivery dates contained instructions from her handler using a cipher she had memorized years earlier during her initial intelligence training. The message was brief but urgent. Network expanding. Prague connection confirmed. Identify leadership structure. Weapons cache location priority. Minimal contact protocol. In effect, she destroyed the evidence by incorporating the paper into her morning prep work, the document disappearing into organic waste that would be composted within hours. Her handler's confirmation meant that her suspicions about Château Bellmont's connection to the Prague weapons trafficking ring were accurate, and that the academy was serving as more than just a transit point. It was an operational hub. Her true mission extended far beyond simple observation. The intelligence community had identified Château Bellmont as a critical node in a network that moved military-grade weapons across European borders using food service logistics as cover. The Academy's international student exchange programs provided perfect documentation for moving personnel, while its prestigious reputation deflected official scrutiny from customs and security agencies. More concerning was evidence suggesting the network had evolved beyond simple trafficking. Intelligence indicated they were establishing weapons caches in major European cities, stockpiling materials for future operations that could destabilize the continent's security. The Prague disruption had scattered the network temporarily, but they had regrouped quickly, adapting their methods while maintaining operational continuity. Ava's background made her uniquely qualified for this assignment. Before her reassignment, she had spent 12 years in deep cover operations, specializing in networks that used legitimate businesses as fronts for illegal activities. Her expertise in weapons systems, logistics, and combat operations was matched by her ability to blend into service-level positions where she could observe without detection. The intelligence that had brought her to Château Bellmont came from multiple sources. Financial analysts had identified irregular payment patterns flowing through the Academy's accounts, transactions that suggested compensation for services far beyond culinary education. Communications intercepts had revealed coded references to special ingredients and exclusive recipes that appeared to describe weapon specifications and delivery schedules. Most damning was surveillance footage from the Prague operation showing Academy vehicles at locations connected to the weapons cache her team had discovered. Her current identity as Ava Ingrid was completely manufactured, supported by documentation that would withstand all but the most intensive investigation. Her cover story as a displaced food service worker with basic culinary training explained her presence without raising questions about her capabilities. The intelligence community had learned that the most effective deep cover identities were those that made the operative appear slightly incompetent rather than impressive people, consistently underestimated threats from those they considered beneath their notice. The academic setting provided both advantages and challenges for her. Mission: the international student body created natural cover for surveillance activities, as her movement throughout the facility could be explained by routine maintenance and supply tasks. However, the isolated location and tight-knit staff community meant that unusual behavior would be noticed quickly, requiring her to maintain perfect consistency in her manufactured persona. Her specific objectives were clear but dangerous. She needed to identify the leadership structure within the Academy, map the physical locations where weapons were stored or processed, document the logistics network used for distribution, and gather evidence that would allow law enforcement to dismantle the entire operation simultaneously across multiple countries. The challenge was accomplishing these objectives while maintaining a cover identity that limited her access to the most sensitive areas of the facility. Her position in the service kitchen provided excellent intelligence gathering opportunities, but reaching the administrative areas and secure storage facilities would require careful planning and significant risk. Most critically, she had to avoid detection by what intelligence analysts suspected was a sophisticated counter-surveillance operation. The network's successful adaptation after the Prague disruption suggested they had learned from their mistakes, implementing security measures that could identify and eliminate threats before they could gather actionable intelligence. As she began her morning prep work, cutting vegetables with precision that suggested far more training than her cover story indicated, Ava reflected on the irony of her situation. She had been told throughout her career to stay in the kitchen by male colleagues who assumed her gender made her unsuitable for dangerous field work. Now that same kitchen had become her perfect cover for the most important mission of her career, one that could prevent a weapons network from destabilizing European security. The blade moved through her fingers with practiced efficiency, each cut reflecting muscle memory developed through years of handling far deadlier instruments. Around her, the normal chaos of a professional kitchen provided cover for her real work, identifying the enemies hiding within Château Bellmont's prestigious walls and preparing to turn their own facility into the weapon that would destroy their network. The third week brought Ava's first direct encounter with the Academy's student elite, a confrontation that would define her relationship with the institution's power structure. She was restocking herbs in the main teaching kitchen when a group of advanced students entered for their morning practical examination, their designer chef's whites immaculate and their attitudes matching their expensive appearances. Leading them was Philippe Beaumont, the Academy's star pupil whose family's restaurant empire had secured his position through generous donations rather than merit. His movements carried the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced consequences for failure, and his eyes held the cold calculation of inherited privilege, protecting itself from any challenge. "Excuse me," Philippe addressed Ava with the palm with tone reserved for servants, not bothering to learn her name despite 3 weeks of daily encounters. "The mise en place stations need immediate attention. Whatever you're doing can wait." Ava nodded politely and began clearing her herb containers, but Philippa's attention lingered on her knife work. She had been julienning carrots for the evening service, her blade moving with precision that created perfectly uniform cuts in a fraction of the time required by most culinary students. "Interesting technique," he observed, his voice carrying undertones of suspicion rather than appreciation. "Very efficient. Where did you train?" "Basic commercial kitchens," Ava replied, deliberately slowing her cutting to appear less skilled. "Nothing formal." Philippe moved closer, studying her knife grip and cutting motion with the calculating attention of someone who understood the difference between natural talent and professional training. "Your hand position suggests classical French technique. Commercial kitchens don't typically teach that level of precision." The comment attracted attention from other students, who gathered around Ava's station with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. She found herself surrounded by young adults who viewed kitchen staff as interchangeable fixtures beneath notice except when they failed to provide adequate service. "Perhaps she watched cooking shows," suggested Margot Delacruz, Philippa's primary rival whose pharmaceutical fortune had bought her way into the Academy's elite circle. Her voice dripped with the kind of dismissive humor that passed for wit among those who had never worked for their position. "Support staff often dream of being real chefs." The group laughed, not bothering to lower their voices as they mocked someone they assumed couldn't understand the subtle cruelties of their social dynamics. Ava continued her work without reaction, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts while her mind catalogued each face and voice for future reference. Chef Dubois entered the kitchen and immediately noticed the gathering around Ava's station. His expression darkened with the territorial anger of someone whose authority was being questioned by the presence of staff in his teaching domain. "Miss Ingrid," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "support staff are not permitted in the main teaching kitchens during instruction hours. Please complete your tasks in the appropriate service areas." "Of course, chef," Ava replied, gathering her materials with the submissive efficiency expected from service personnel. As she moved toward the exit, Philippe deliberately stepped into her path, forcing her to navigate around him in a gesture designed to demonstrate the hierarchy that separated kitchen staff from their social superiors. "Next time," Philippe said quietly, his voice carrying menace disguised as helpful advice, "remember your place." We wouldn't want any accidents to happen because someone forgot where they belong. The threat was subtle but unmistakable, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced retaliation for their cruelty. Ava met his gaze briefly, her expression remaining neutral while noting the cold intelligence behind his privileged exterior. Philippe Beaumont was more than just an arrogant student. He was someone accustomed to enforcing hierarchies through intimidation. Later that afternoon, Ava encountered the Academy's administrative structure during a routine supply delivery to the main office complex. The contrast between the service areas and administrative wing was striking. Marble floors replaced industrial concrete. Crystal chandeliers hung above mahogany furniture, and the air carried expensive perfume rather than kitchen aromas. She was delivering specialty oils to the executive dining room when she overheard a conversation between Director Laurent Castellana and an unidentified visitor speaking rapid German. The discussion centered on delivery schedules and quality control measures that seemed unnecessarily detailed for culinary supplies. The Amsterdam route requires additional security measures, the visitor was saying as Ava arranged bottles in the adjacent storage cabinet. Prague created complications that cannot be repeated. Director Castellana's response was carefully modulated, his tone suggesting awareness that their conversation might be overheard. All procurement follows established protocols. Quality standards are maintained regardless of origin points. The coded language confirmed Ava's suspicions about the Academy's illegal activities while providing new intelligence about the network's operational structure. The reference to Prague complications suggested they were aware of the disruption her previous mission had caused, and the discussion of security measures indicated they were adapting their methods to prevent similar interference. Her presence in the administrative wing was noticed by Madame Rousseau, the Academy's deputy director, whose sharp eyes missed nothing that occurred within her domain. The woman appeared silently behind Ava as she completed her delivery, her expression carrying the cold assessment of someone evaluating a potential threat. Kitchen staff deliveries should be coordinated through proper channels, Madame Rousseau stated, her accent revealing Eastern European origins despite her French name. Direct access to administrative areas requires specific authorization. I was instructed to deliver these personally, Ava replied, maintaining her deferential demeanor, while noting the defensive reaction her presence had triggered. Chef Dubois specified immediate placement in the executive dining storage. Madame Rousseau studied the delivery documentation with excessive attention to detail, her scrutiny suggesting familiarity with identifying forged or irregular paperwork. After several tense moments, she returned the documents with obvious reluctance. The morning of the fourth week brought an unexpected crisis that would test Ava's ability to maintain her cover while demonstrating capabilities that didn't match her assumed identity. A fire had broken out in the main teaching kitchen during the night, damaging critical equipment just hours before the Academy's most important evaluation, demonstration for the European Culinary Council that would determine continued accreditation and funding. Chef Dubois stood amid the smoke-damaged kitchen, his usual composure cracking as he surveyed the destroyed prep stations and ruined ingredients. The council representatives were arriving in 6 hours, expecting a flawless presentation of the Academy's capabilities, and the main kitchen was unusable. "This is catastrophic," he muttered to his assistant chefs, unaware that Ava was restocking undamaged supplies nearby. The molecular gastronomy demonstration requires precise temperature control and specialized equipment. "We can't relocate to the service kitchen. It lacks the necessary technology." Ava paused in her work, her trained mind automatically assessing the problem and developing solutions. The fire had destroyed the main kitchen's advanced systems, but her experience in field operations had taught her to accomplish complex objectives with improvised resources. She knew exactly how to recreate the required conditions using equipment scattered throughout the facility. "Excuse me, chef," she said quietly. approaching Dubois with the deference expected from support staff. "I might have a suggestion." Dubois turned toward her with barely contained irritation, his stress manifesting as hostility toward anyone who dared interrupt his crisis management. "Miss Ingrid, this is not the time for maintenance concerns. We're facing institutional disaster. The service kitchen's blast chiller can be reconfigured for molecular work," Ava continued, her voice remaining calm despite his dismissive tone. "Combined with the wine storage temperature controls and the chocolate tempering units, you could recreate the necessary environmental conditions for the demonstration." The suggestion stopped Dubois mid-gesture, his engineering mind processing the technical implications of her proposal. She was describing a complex integration of separate systems that would require sophisticated understanding of temperature, dynamics, pressure relationships, and timing coordination knowledge far beyond what any basic prep cook should possess. "That's theoretically possible," he admitted slowly, his suspicion warring with desperate hope. "But the calibration would be extraordinarily complex. 1-degree variation could destroy the entire presentation." "I could assist with the setup," Ava offered, maintaining her humble demeanor while revealing just enough expertise to be useful without raising too many questions. "I've worked with similar improvised systems in commercial emergency situations." Within 2 hours, Ava had orchestrated a transformation that impressed even the Academy's most experienced chefs. She coordinated the movement of equipment between kitchen areas, reconfigured temperature control systems, and established workflow patterns that maximized efficiency in the cramped service kitchen. Her directions were precise, her timing flawless, and her understanding of complex culinary physics unmistakable. Philippe Beaumont observed the reconstruction with growing unease, his privileged position giving him enough technical knowledge to recognize that Ava's improvised solutions were far more sophisticated than anything he could have conceived. He watched her direct senior chefs through equipment modifications with quiet authority that suggested extensive experience in crisis management. "Where exactly did you learn emergency kitchen reconstruction?" Felipe asked, positioning himself close enough to observe her work while maintaining the pretense of casual interest. "Commercial kitchens face equipment failures regularly," Ava replied, adjusting pressure settings on a reconfigured blast chiller with movements that suggested intimate familiarity with industrial systems. "You learn to adapt quickly or lose your job." Her explanation was plausible but incomplete, leaving gaps that someone with Philippe's suspicious nature couldn't ignore. He had observed enough professional kitchens to know that basic prep cooks didn't possess the systems integration knowledge she was displaying, nor the confident leadership that had emerged during the crisis. The European Culinary Council demonstration proceeded flawlessly, with the improvised kitchen setup performing better than the original equipment in several key areas. Council members praised the Academy's innovative approach and adaptability, unaware that their accolades were directed toward a solution developed by someone they assumed was insignificant support staff. After the presentation, Chef Dubois approached Ava with an expression that mixed gratitude with growing confusion about her capabilities. "Your suggestion saved the Academy's accreditation," he acknowledged formally. "That level of technical knowledge is unusual for someone in your position." "I'm glad I could help," Ava replied, already beginning to disassemble the temporary systems. To avoid further attention, her demonstration of expertise had been necessary to prevent institutional collapse, but it had also created questions about her background that could compromise her mission. Later that evening, she noticed increased scrutiny from the Academy's security personnel. Guards who had previously ignored her presence now tracked her movements with obvious interest. Her access card was scanned more thoroughly at checkpoints, and she observed additional cameras being positioned to monitor the service kitchen areas. Where she worked, most concerning was a conversation she overheard between Madame Rousseau and an unidentified man speaking in heavily accented English. They were discussing the kitchen assistant who demonstrated unusual capabilities, and debating whether additional background verification was warranted. Technical skills can be acquired through experience, Madame Rousseau was saying as Ava passed their position while carrying supplies. But leadership capability and crisis management suggest training that doesn't match her documented background. Should we initiate enhanced screening? The man asked, his tone suggesting familiarity with investigation protocols. Not yet, Rousseau replied carefully. But maintain observation. Unusual competence can indicate deception. Ava continued her work without reaction, but the conversation confirmed that her life-saving intervention had attracted exactly the kind of attention she had been trying to avoid. Her cover remained intact, but it was now being actively questioned by people who understood that extraordinary capabilities rarely emerged from ordinary backgrounds. The irony wasn't lost on her by demonstrating the expertise necessary to save the Academy from disaster. She had also revealed inconsistencies that could expose her true identity and destroy her mission. She had been forced to choose between maintaining perfect cover and preventing institutional collapse, and her decision to act had placed her directly in the crosshairs of people who specialized in detecting deception. As she returned to her quarters that evening, Ava reflected on the dangerous balance she would need to maintain going forward. Her cover was compromised but not blown. Her capabilities were questioned but not yet understood, and her mission remained viable but significantly more dangerous. The Academy's salvation had become her potential downfall, and she would need all her intelligence training to navigate the increased scrutiny, while continuing to gather the evidence that would expose their criminal activities. By the end of her 4th week at Château Bellmont, Ava had identified a pattern of systematic corruption that extended far beyond simple weapons trafficking. The Academy's prestigious reputation served as perfect cover for an operation that was fundamentally transforming how illegal weapons moved across European borders, with implications that reached the highest levels of continental security. Her access to supply chain documentation revealed the scope of the deception. Legitimate culinary ingredients were being mixed with shipments containing weapon components, disguised as specialized cooking equipment. Italian truffle containers held precision machined firing pins. German chocolate shipments concealed high-grade explosives, and French wine cases transported advanced targeting systems. The network had achieved something unprecedented: complete integration of illegal weapons distribution with legitimate international commerce. The financial records she accessed during routine inventory updates painted an even more disturbing picture. The Academy was processing payments that dwarfed any reasonable culinary budget, with funds flowing from accounts linked to known terrorist organizations, mercenary groups, and destabilized regions where weapons fueled ongoing conflicts. Weren't just moving existing weapons, they were financing the production of new ones. Most concerning was evidence suggesting the Academy was training more than future chefs. Certain students received instruction that had nothing to do with culinary arts, learning skills that ranged from explosives handling to tactical communications. Their tuition was paid by organizations with no legitimate interest in gourmet cooking, and their background showed gaps that suggested manufactured identities similar to her own. The realization struck her with the force of professional revelation. Château Bellmont was operating as a finishing school for international criminals, using culinary training as cover for instruction in sophisticated criminal techniques. The prestigious reputation and international student body provided perfect documentation for moving trained operatives across borders, while the Academy's connections to high-end restaurants created placement opportunities in major cities worldwide. During a routine supply delivery to the Academy's administrative wing, Ava discovered evidence that confirmed her worst suspicions. Hidden within routine catering contracts were specifications for specialty ingredients that matched the technical descriptions of weapons components her previous missions had interdicted. The Prague operation she had participated in 3 months earlier had only disrupted one node of a network that was far more extensive and sophisticated than intelligence agencies had realized. The documentation revealed a timetable that made her blood run cold. Multiple graduation ceremonies were scheduled across Europe over the next 6 months, events that would disperse trained operatives and weapons caches to major population centers. Each ceremony would be disguised as a legitimate culinary celebration, with graduates carrying credentials that would allow them to establish operations in restaurants, catering companies, and food service businesses throughout the continent. The human cost of the Academy's activities became clear as she reviewed incident reports disguised as routine academic documentation. Students who asked inconvenient questions faced academic dismissal that appeared to be permanent. Staff members who observed unusual activities were transferred to other positions with no forwarding information. The Academy maintained its pristine reputation through systematic elimination of anyone who might expose their true activities. More chilling was evidence of collaboration with legitimate educational institutions across Europe. The network had infiltrated other culinary schools, hospitality programs, and food service training centers, creating a continent-wide infrastructure for moving weapons and trained operatives. They had weaponized the international education system itself, turning institutions dedicated to cultural exchange into tools of destabilization. Ava's investigation was interrupted by an emergency staff meeting called by Director Castellana. The first time all Academy personnel had been assembled since her arrival. The formal dining hall filled with faculty, administrative staff, and support personnel, their expressions ranging from curiosity to carefully concealed anxiety. Castellana stood before them with the commanding presence of someone accustomed to absolute authority, his expensive suit and perfectly groomed appearance projecting the image of academic leadership, while his eyes carried the cold calculation of someone protecting dangerous secrets. Recent events have raised security concerns that require our immediate attention, he announced, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. There have been irregularities in our supply chain management and unauthorized access to restricted areas. Effective immediately, all staff will undergo enhanced background verification. The announcement created a ripple of unease throughout the assembled personnel, but Ava noted that certain individuals, those she suspected of being part of the criminal operation, showed no surprise at the directive. They had been prepared for this announcement, suggesting coordination between leadership and the network's security apparatus. Additionally, Castellana continued, we will be implementing new protocols for facility access and communication monitoring. These measures are necessary to protect the Academy's reputation and ensure the safety of our international student body. Ava understood the implications immediately. Her successful intervention during the kitchen crisis had triggered a comprehensive security review designed to identify threats within the Academy's operations. They suspected infiltration but weren't yet certain of the source, so they were implementing measures that would expose anyone operating under false pretenses. The enhanced background verification would require her to maintain her cover identity under intensive scrutiny, while the communication monitoring would eliminate her ability to contact her handler through normal channels. Most dangerously, the new access protocols would restrict her movement throughout the facility, limiting her ability to gather the evidence needed to expose the network's true scope. As the meeting concluded and staff began filing out with expressions of concern and confusion, Ava realized that her mission had entered a new phase. The Academy's leadership was aware of a security threat, but hadn't yet identified her as the source. She had a narrow window of opportunity to gather decisive evidence before the enhanced security measures would make further investigation impossible. Systemic problem was far worse than her original intelligence had indicated. This wasn't just weapons trafficking, it was a comprehensive assault on European security using education and culture as weapons. The academy was producing not just illegal weapons, but trained operatives, not just facilitating crime, but actively destabilizing legitimate institutions. She had discovered a conspiracy that threatened the foundation of continental security, but exposing it would require her to survive an investigation specifically designed to identify and eliminate people exactly like her. The kitchen that had been her cover was about to become her battleground, and she would need to transform from invisible observer to active operative if she had any hope of preventing the Academy's graduation ceremonies from unleashing chaos. Across Europe, future deliveries will follow standard protocols, she announced, her tone making clear that Ava's access to administrative areas would be severely restricted going forward. Kitchen staff should remain in appropriate service zones. As Ava returned to her assigned work areas, she reflected on the day's encounters. Both Felipe and Madame Rousseau had reacted to her presence with suspicion that exceeded normal, concern about staff wandering into restricted areas. Their responses suggested an organization that was actively protecting secrets, paranoid about exposure, and prepared to use intimidation to maintain security. More importantly, the casual dismissal and deliberate humiliation she had experienced revealed the power structure's fundamental weakness, their absolute confidence that kitchen staff posed no threat to their operations. They saw her as invisible, beneath consideration, unable to understand or interfere with their sophisticated criminal enterprise. That blindness would become their downfall. They had underestimated her not because of her skills, but because of their own prejudices about gender, class, and position. In trying to keep her in the kitchen, they had placed her exactly where she needed to be to destroy them. The enhanced security protocols began the following morning with methodical efficiency that confirmed Ava's assessment of the Academy's sophisticated operations. Biometric scanners appeared at every access point. Surveillance cameras were repositioned to eliminate blind spots, and staff movements were tracked through mandatory RFID badges that recorded location and duration of every activity. Ava adapted to the new restrictions while searching for allies who might share her suspicions about the Academy's true nature. Her isolation was broken unexpectedly during the lunch shift when she encountered Sofia Martinez, a young kitchen supervisor whose sharp eyes and careful questions suggested intelligence that extended beyond culinary management. Sofia had been observing the Academy's operations with growing unease, her position as evening shift coordinator, providing access to activities that occurred after regular hours. She noticed the irregular deliveries, the students who never attended actual cooking classes, and the areas of the facility that remained mysteriously off-limits even to senior staff. The chocolate shipment from Belgium contained metal components, Sofia mentioned quietly as they worked side by side preparing vegetables for the evening service. Her comment appeared casual but was delivered with precise timing to avoid surveillance microphones positioned throughout the kitchen. Ava looked up from her cutting board, recognizing the calculated risk Sofia was taking by sharing such specific observations. Kitchen equipment is often shipped with food supplies to avoid customs complications, she replied carefully, testing whether Sofia was seeking confirmation of suspicious activities or gathering intelligence to report to Academy. Security. Chocolate doesn't require titanium reinforcement brackets, Sofia continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. And the installation instructions were written in Arabic with technical specifications that had nothing to do with culinary applications. The specificity of Sofia's observations convinced Ava that the kitchen supervisor had discovered evidence of the weapons trafficking operation through her own investigation. More importantly, Sofia's willingness to share this information suggested she was actively seeking someone who could help her understand what she had witnessed. Over the following days, they developed a careful communication system that allowed them to share information while avoiding the Academy's comprehensive surveillance network. Sophia's evening shift access provided intelligence about nighttime activities, while Ava's supply chain responsibilities gave her insight into the logistical operations that supported the criminal network. Sophia revealed that certain students received after-hours instruction in the academy's basement levels, areas that didn't appear on any official floor plans. The classes were taught by instructors who never appeared during regular academic hours, and the curriculum involved equipment that had no relationship to culinary education. She had observed training sessions that appeared to focus on demolitions, communications, and tactical coordination. "They're not learning to cook," Sophia confided during a brief moment when they were alone in the walk-in cooler, the only area they had identified as being free from electronic surveillance. "They're learning to kill." Ava shared her own observations about the supply chain irregularities, the financial transactions that exceeded any reasonable culinary budget, and the documentation that revealed connections to known criminal organizations. Together, they began mapping the scope of the Academy's illegal activities, creating a picture that was far more comprehensive than either could have developed alone. Sophia's background provided crucial context for understanding the Academy's operations. She had worked in legitimate culinary institutions across Europe before joining Château Bellmont, giving her comparative knowledge that made the Academy's irregularities obvious. Her family's restaurant business had been destroyed by protection rackets connected to weapons trafficking, creating personal motivation for her investigation beyond professional curiosity. "My brother was killed in Barcelona," Sophia revealed. During one of their covert conversations, her voice carrying controlled anger that spoke to years of suppressed grief. "The weapons used in that attack came through a network that used food service companies as cover. When I recognized similar patterns here, I couldn't ignore them." The revelation created a bond between them that went beyond shared suspicion about the Academy's activities. Both women had personal stakes in exposing the criminal network, and both understood that their investigation placed them in mortal danger from people who had already demonstrated willingness to eliminate threats to their operations. Sophia's position also provided access to personnel files that revealed disturbing patterns in staff turnover. Previous employees who had asked questions about irregular activities had vanished from Academy records with no forwarding information. Background checks on current staff showed that many had connections to military or security services, suggesting the Academy actively recruited personnel with skills that extended beyond culinary instruction. Most valuable was Sophia's discovery of a communications protocol used by the Academy's leadership to coordinate with external partners. She had observed Director Castellana and Madame Rousseau using encrypted messaging systems during evening hours, communications that followed timing patterns consistent with international coordination across multiple time zones. Their alliance faced immediate testing when the enhanced background investigations began targeting staff members who had demonstrated unusual competence or curiosity. Ava's intervention during the kitchen crisis had placed her near the top of the priority list, while Sophia's questions about supply irregularities had attracted similar scrutiny. "They're going to investigate us systematically," Sophia warned as they observed security personnel conducting detailed interviews with kitchen staff. "Our cover stories need to be perfect, and we need evidence that can survive their attempts to discredit us." Ava agreed, recognizing that their investigation had reached a critical juncture. They possessed enough intelligence to understand the scope of the criminal network, but they lacked the decisive evidence needed to expose it before the Academy's security apparatus identified and eliminated them. The alliance with Sophia transformed Ava's mission from isolated intelligence gathering to collaborative resistance against a sophisticated criminal organization. Together, they represented a genuine threat to the Academy's operations, but they also faced escalating danger from people who had successfully concealed their activities from law enforcement agencies across multiple countries. As they planned their next steps in the temporary safety of the walk-in cooler, Both women understood that their investigation had passed the point of no return. They would either expose the Academy's criminal network or become its next victims, and the margin for error was shrinking with each day that brought them closer to the enhanced security review that could destroy their covers and their lives. The background investigation intensified during Ava's 5th week at the Academy, transforming from routine security review to targeted operation designed to identify specific threats within the staff population. Security personnel who had previously been invisible began conducting detailed interviews with employees, their questions probing for inconsistencies that might reveal deception or ulterior motives. Ava's interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the administrative wing's conference room, a sterile environment designed to intimidate and disorient subjects under investigation. The space featured recording equipment, stress monitoring devices, and carefully positioned lighting that would reveal micro-expressions indicating deception. She recognized the setup immediately, a professional interrogation facility disguised as academic administration. The investigator was introduced as Dr. Heinrich Weber, supposedly an educational consultant conducting routine employee evaluations. However, his questioning techniques, observational methods, and psychological manipulation tactics revealed extensive training in counterintelligence operations. He wasn't evaluating employee satisfaction, he was hunting for infiltrators. "Miss Ingrid," Weber began, consulting a file that appeared to contain far more information than any legitimate employment record should possess. "Your background shows an interesting pattern of employment across multiple European countries. What drew you to food service work?" The question appeared innocent, but was carefully crafted to test whether her cover story could withstand detailed scrutiny. Ava maintained her humble demeanor while providing responses that matched her manufactured identity. But Weber's follow-up questions revealed knowledge that suggested extensive investigation into her fictional background. "Your previous employer in Vienna has no record of your employment," Weber noted, his tone conversational, but his eyes calculating. "The restaurant you listed closed 2 years before your claimed employment period. Would you care to explain this discrepancy?" Ava felt a cold spike of recognition. Her cover identity was being systematically dismantled by someone with access to resources that exceeded normal background verification. Weber wasn't just investigating her claimed history. He was actively testing whether she was operating under false documentation. "Employment records in that sector are often informal," she replied, maintaining steady eye contact while her mind raced through alternative explanations. "Small restaurants frequently operate with minimal documentation to avoid tax complications." Weber smiled slightly, the expression carrying no warmth while suggesting he had anticipated her response. "Of course. However, your technical knowledge during the recent kitchen emergency suggests training that exceeds what informal employment would provide. Where did you acquire such sophisticated understanding of industrial kitchen systems?" The trap was obvious. Weber had connected her crisis intervention to the background inconsistencies, creating a pattern that suggested deception. Ava realized that her life-saving actions had provided the evidence needed to expose her false identity, but she couldn't regret preventing the Academy's collapse without compromising her mission entirely. After the interview, Ava noticed immediate changes in how Academy personnel treated her. Security guards tracked her movements with obvious surveillance. Her access card was flagged for additional verification at every checkpoint, and colleagues began maintaining careful distance as if associating with her carried professional risk. Most concerning was Philippe Beaumont's increased attention to her activities. The privileged student had apparently been recruited as an informal observer, tasked with monitoring her behavior for signs of suspicious activity. His presence became constant during her work hours, his questions increasingly pointed about her background and motivations. "You seem very interested in our supply deliveries," Felipe observed as Ava completed routine inventory tasks under his watchful scrutiny. Most kitchen assistants don't pay such detailed attention to shipping documentation and storage protocols. Proper inventory management requires understanding source reliability, Ava replied, continuing her work while noting Felipe's positioning to block her access to certain storage areas. Contaminated ingredients can destroy an entire service. Felipe moved closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper that wouldn't be captured by surveillance equipment. Contamination can take many forms. Sometimes the danger comes from people who aren't what they appear to be. The message was clear. Felipe suspected her true identity and was prepared to act on those suspicions. His family's connections too. The academy's financial structure gave him authority that extended beyond student status, making him a dangerous adversary who could trigger her exposure at any moment. Sophia faced similar escalation and scrutiny. Her evening shift activities now monitored by security personnel who had previously ignored support staff movements. Her access to basement areas was restricted, her communications were being monitored, and her questions about irregular activities had been reported to administration as potential security violations. During one of their increasingly rare private moments, Sophia revealed that her background investigation had uncovered discrepancies in her own cover story. "They know I'm not who I claim to be," she whispered urgently. "Weber showed me documentation that proves my family restaurant story is fabricated. I think we have days, maybe hours, before they move against us." The revelation confirmed Ava's assessment that the Academy's security apparatus was far more sophisticated than typical educational institution protection. They were dealing with professional counterintelligence operations, capable of exposing manufactured identities and tracking investigative activities across international boundaries. More ominously, Sophia had discovered evidence that previous staff members who had aroused similar suspicion had simply disappeared without explanation. Personnel files showed abrupt terminations with no forwarding information, and local police reports contained no records of missing person investigations. The Academy possessed the capability and willingness to eliminate threats permanently. "We need decisive action," Sophia continued, her voice carrying desperate urgency. "Whatever evidence we're going to gather, it has to happen now. Once they complete the background investigations, we won't have opportunity for subtle intelligence gathering." Ava agreed, recognizing that their mission had reached its critical phase. The enhanced security review was designed specifically to identify and eliminate infiltrators like herself, and the investigation sophistication suggested they were running out of time before exposure would trigger lethal retaliation. That evening, as she returned to her quarters under obvious surveillance, Ava received a coded message hidden within routine maintenance documentation. Her handler had detected increased communications traffic suggesting the Academy was coordinating with external security services to neutralize identified threats. The message was brief but urgent. Enhanced protocols detected. Extraction contingency activated. Primary objectives must be achieved within 48 hours. Network elimination takes priority over operative safety. She destroyed the evidence immediately, understanding that her mission had transitioned from intelligence gathering to active operation. The Academy's criminal network had to be exposed and dismantled before they could eliminate the Ponte investigation and continue their preparations for the continent-wide weapons distribution that would begin with the next graduation ceremony. Ava had 48 hours to transform from undercover investigator to active operative, gathering decisive evidence while avoiding detection by security services, specifically trained to identify and eliminate people like her. The kitchen that had been her sanctuary was about to become her battleground, and survival would depend on skills that went far beyond anything she had displayed during her weeks of careful infiltration. The crisis erupted at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, when Sophia's screams pierced the Academy's silence. followed by the unmistakable sound of automatic gunfire echoing through the basement corridors. Ava woke instantly in her staff quarters, her combat training overriding the disorientation of sudden awakening as she assessed the situation with deadly precision. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the facility, but the response pattern was wrong. Security personnel were moving to contain rather than investigate, suggesting they had expected the violence rather than being surprised by it. Through her window, Ava observed vehicles with government markings surrounding the academy, their positioning indicating a coordinated operation rather than emergency response. She dressed quickly, in dark clothing, while mentally cataloging the weapons and resources available in her immediate environment. Her cover as kitchen staff had required maintaining minimal defensive capabilities, but years of field training had taught her to identify improvised weapons and tactical advantages in any setting. The academy's kitchen would become her armory. Moving through the service corridors with silent efficiency, Ava reached the main kitchen complex to find it occupied by armed personnel who were systematically searching storage areas and equipment stations. Their movements revealed military training and familiarity with the facility's layout, confirming her suspicion that the Academy's security apparatus included professional military contractors. From her concealed position behind industrial refrigeration units, she observed the systematic elimination of evidence that would expose the Academy's criminal operations. Hard drives were being removed from computer systems, documentation was being destroyed, and chemical agents were being deployed to eliminate forensic traces that might survive the upcoming facility sanitization. The operation's scope became clear as she monitored radio communications between the armed teams. This wasn't just eliminating Sophia and herself. It was comprehensive destruction of the entire intelligence gathering operation that had threatened to expose the weapons trafficking network. Everyone who had demonstrated curiosity about the Academy's irregular activities was being systematically eliminated. Through the kitchen service entrance, she witnessed Philippe Beaumont directing security personnel with authority that confirmed his role exceeded privileged student status. He was coordinating the elimination operation with cold efficiency, his earlier arrogance replaced by professional competence that revealed extensive training in counterintelligence operations. The kitchen assistants' quarters are empty, one operative reported to Felipe through their communication system. Target has evaded initial containment, implementing facility-wide search protocols. Philippa's response carried deadly certainty. She's military trained. Assume combat capability and lethal intent. Authorization granted for maximum force engagement. Ava realized that her cover had been completely blown, but more critically, the Academy's leadership had decided that exposure risk required eliminating all potential witnesses, rather than simply neutralizing identified threats. The graduation ceremony schedule meant they couldn't afford investigation delays, so they were implementing total sanitization of the facility and its personnel. The kitchen's industrial equipment became her arsenal as she prepared for the confrontation. That would determine whether the criminal network's continental operations would be exposed or successfully concealed. Commercial-grade knives provided close combat weapons, industrial chemicals offered explosive and incendiary options, and the facility's gas systems could be weaponized against attacking personnel. Her first objective was reaching the secure communication equipment she had identified in the Academy's administrative wing, the only way to transmit the intelligence she had gathered to her handler before the elimination operation destroyed all evidence. The path required traversing areas now occupied by armed personnel specifically trained to prevent exactly that kind of intelligence breach. Moving through maintenance shafts and service corridors, Ava employed every skill acquired during 12 years of covert operations. She avoided detection while gathering improvised weapons from cleaning supplies, kitchen equipment, and industrial maintenance tools. Each item was evaluated for tactical utility. Drain cleaner became chemical weapons, Kitchen timers became detonation devices, and steel wool combined with electrical systems created flashbang diversions. The first direct confrontation occurred in the main corridor connecting the kitchen complex to the administrative wing. 3 armed operatives had positioned themselves to control access routes, their professional positioning revealing military training that matched her own capabilities. The engagement would test whether her combat skills had deteriorated during weeks of kitchen work. The fight was brief but savage. Ava used the corridor's industrial fixtures as cover while deploying improvised weapons with lethal efficiency. Cleaning chemicals sprayed into eyes, kitchen knives thrown with surgical precision, and electrical systems short-circuited to create confusion and distraction. Within 90 seconds, 3 trained killers were neutralized using nothing more than materials available in any commercial kitchen. The engagement's outcome sent shockwaves through the elimination operations command structure. Philippa's voice carried new respect as he coordinated the response. Target has eliminated Bravo team using improvised weapons. Revise threat assessment to Special Forces level. Deploy heavy equipment for final engagement. Ava continued to ward the administrative wing, knowing that each minute delayed increased the likelihood that the Academy's criminal network would successfully destroy all evidence of their operations. Sophia's sacrifice had provided the crisis that exposed the network's true nature, but that revelation would be meaningless unless the intelligence reached law enforcement agencies capable of coordinating international response. The basement levels, where Sophia had discovered the illegal training operations, were now sealed and being sterilized with chemical agents that would eliminate all forensic evidence. The weapons cache locations she had identified were being evacuated, and the communications equipment that could reveal the network's international connections was being systematically destroyed. Her mission had transformed from intelligence gathering to direct action, with the Academy's kitchen serving as the weapons cache that would determine whether a continent-wide criminal conspiracy would be exposed or allowed to continue operations. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had told her to stay in the kitchen, never realizing that the kitchen would become the arsenal that destroyed them. As she approached the final corridor leading to the communication equipment, Ava prepared for the confrontation that would determine not just her survival, but the fate of the intelligence operation that had cost Sophia's life and threatened the security of every major European city where the Academy's graduates would soon establish their operations. The administrative wing's marble corridors had been transformed into a kill zone, with overlapping fields of fire designed to eliminate anyone attempting to reach the secure communication equipment. Ava studied the tactical situation from her concealed position, counting 8 operatives positioned with military precision to prevent exactly the kind of intelligence transmission she needed to accomplish. Director Castellina's voice echoed through the facility's public address system, his tone carrying false concern designed to misdirect any external observers who might investigate the emergency response. Due to a gas leak emergency, Château Bellmont is implementing evacuation procedures. All personnel should remain in designated safe areas while emergency services address the situation. The announcement provided cover for the elimination operation, while explaining away the presence of armed personnel and government vehicles. Local authorities would accept the gas leak explanation, allowing the criminal network to complete their sanitization operation without interference from legitimate law enforcement. Through intercepted radio communications, Ava learned that the operation's scope extended beyond the Academy itself. Similar emergencies were being implemented at culinary institutions across Europe, suggesting a coordinated effort to eliminate multiple investigation sites simultaneously. The network was sacrificing individual facilities to protect the overall operation, indicating resources and coordination that exceeded her initial threat assessment. Philippe Beaumont appeared at the corridor intersection, no longer maintaining his student persona but wearing tactical gear that revealed his true role as the operations field commander. His transformation from arrogant student to professional operative confirmed Ava's suspicion that the Academy student body included trained killers disguised as culinary enthusiasts. "Miss Ingrid," Felipe called out, his voice carrying across the marble surfaces with calculated authority. "Your resistance is professionally admirable but strategically pointless. We control the facility, the communications, and the local emergency response. Surrender now, and your termination will be quick." Ava remained silent, using the conversation to triangulate positions while preparing the improvised explosive device she had constructed from kitchen, chemicals, and academy supplies. The administrative wing's architecture provided tactical advantages that professional training had taught her to exploit, but she would need perfect timing to overcome 8 trained killers with superior equipment and positioning. "Your handler abandoned you," Felipe continued, his psychological warfare tactics revealing intelligence training that matched his combat capabilities. "The communications intercepts show no extraction protocols activated. You're alone, surrounded, and fighting for information that will die with you." The taunt contained enough truth to be disturbing. Her 48-hour deadline had expired without any sign of external support, suggesting that her intelligence agency had written off the operation as compromised. However, her mission remained valid regardless of extraction prospects. The evidence of the Academy's criminal network had to reach law enforcement agencies before the graduation. Ceremonies dispersed trained operatives across Europe. Ava's calculated risk involved using the administrative wing's own security systems against the operatives protecting it. The building's fire suppression system could be triggered manually, creating chaos and visual obstruction that would neutralize their positioning. Advantages: the emergency lockdown protocols would trap them in the same corridors they were using to contain her, and the facility's own surveillance equipment could be turned into communication devices if she could reach the main control room. The engagement began with her improvised explosive device detonating in the main corridor, sending marble fragments and chemical smoke throughout the wing, while triggering automatic fire suppression systems. Water sprayed from ceiling fixtures, emergency lighting activated, and lockdown protocols sealed exterior exits as the building's safety systems responded to what appeared to be a catastrophic emergency. In the chaos that followed, Ava moved with deadly efficiency through the corridors she had memorized during weeks of careful observation. Kitchen knives became throwing weapons, cleaning supplies created chemical barriers, and her knowledge of the building's architecture allowed her to exploit blind spots and alternative routes that the operatives hadn't considered. The first 2 kills occurred within seconds of each other. One operative eliminated by a perfectly thrown knife that found the gap between body armor plates. Another incapacitated by industrial-strength oven cleaner that caused temporary blindness and respiratory distress. Their professional training hadn't prepared them for an opponent who could turn any domestic environment into a lethal battlefield. Philippa's voice carried new urgency as he coordinated the remaining operatives' response to casualties they hadn't anticipated. Target is using facility systems and improvised weapons. Assume unconventional engagement protocols. Deploy incendiary charges to force positioning. The tactical adaptation revealed Philippa's competence as a field commander, but it also confirmed that the elimination operation was improvised rather than thoroughly planned. They had expected to overwhelm a single intelligence operative through superior numbers and equipment, not engage in extended combat with someone capable of turning their own facility against them. Ava reached the communication control room as explosions began erupting throughout the administrative wing, the operatives using demolition charges to destroy cover and force her into open areas where their superior firepower would be decisive. She had minutes to transmit her intelligence before the building's destruction would eliminate all evidence of the Academy's criminal operations. the secure communication system activated with her emergency authorization codes, establishing contact with intelligence services across multiple European countries simultaneously. Her transmission included the complete evidence package. She had compiled financial records, logistics documentation, personnel files, and facility layouts that would allow coordinated law enforcement response to the entire criminal network. Priority Alpha transmission, she broadcast, her voice calm despite the explosions approaching her position. Château Bellmont confirmed as weapons trafficking hub. Continental network exposed. Coordinate immediate response to prevent dispersal. Graduation ceremonies are weapons deployment operations. Philippa's voice reached her through the facility's communication system, his tone carrying genuine respect. Despite their lethal opposition. Impressive work, Miss Ingrid. Unfortunately, your transmission will be your final act. The control room's reinforced door exploded inward as shaped charges eliminated her defensive position. Ava faced the final confrontation, armed with nothing but kitchen implements and improvised weapons, standing against professionally equipped operatives in a room filled with the communication equipment that had just exposed a continent-wide criminal. Conspiracy. The kitchen had indeed become her weapons cache, but whether those weapons would be sufficient to survive the calculated risk she had taken remained to be determined in the deadly seconds that would follow. The final confrontation erupted in the communication control room with explosive violence that would have been unimaginable when Ava first arrived as a humble kitchen assistant. Felipe led 4 remaining operatives through the shattered doorway, their tactical formation designed to overwhelm a single target through coordinated fire and movement. They expected to face a desperate intelligence operative armed with improvised weapons and fading hope. Instead, they encountered someone who had shed every pretense of her manufactured identity, revealing the deadly competence of a special forces veteran who had turned their own facility into a lethal battlefield. Ava moved with fluid precision that transformed the control room's equipment into weapons, cover, and tactical advantages that professional training had taught her to exploit under extreme conditions. The engagement lasted 93 seconds and demonstrated capabilities that shattered every assumption the criminal network had made about their opposition. Kitchen knives thrown with surgical accuracy found gaps in body armor that shouldn't have been visible to civilian observers. Industrial chemicals deployed with tactical expertise created barriers and diversions that disrupted professional military formations. Most devastating was her use of the facility's own systems. Electrical panels became electrocution traps, ventilation shafts provided invisible movement routes, and fire suppression equipment became improvised crowd control weapons. Philip watched his team fall with growing recognition that he was facing someone whose training exceeded his own considerable capabilities. "You're not just intelligence," he said as he took cover behind overturned furniture, his voice carrying professional respect mixed with dawning understanding. "Special operations. Which unit?" "Does it matter?" Ava replied, her voice calm despite the lethal chaos surrounding them. She moved between cover positions with efficiency that demonstrated extensive combat experience, each movement calculated to maintain tactical advantage while eliminating remaining threats. "Your network is exposed." The transmission reached 17 law enforcement agencies simultaneously. "It's over." Philippa's response revealed the depth of the criminal network's preparation for exactly this scenario. "You think one facility matters? We have operations in 43 cities across 12 countries." Château Bellmont was always expendable, a sacrifice to protect the real network. The revelation confirmed Ava's worst fears about the conspiracy scope, but it also provided critical intelligence that her transmission had included in real-time updates to coordinating agencies. Felipe's admission of the network's true extent would trigger continental-wide law enforcement response that the criminals couldn't anticipate or prevent. "The graduation ceremonies were decoys," Felipe continued. maintaining his position while calculating his tactical options. Real deployment happened months ago. Tonight's operation eliminates witnesses to a program that's already achieved its objectives. Ava processed this information while maintaining suppressing fire that prevented Felipe from coordinating with any remaining operatives who might still be operational elsewhere in the facility. The network's sophistication exceeded even her revised threat assessments, but the intelligence she had gathered would still provide law enforcement with the evidence needed to begin dismantling their operations. The control room surveillance. Monitors displayed scenes throughout the academy that confirmed the elimination operation's comprehensive scope. Bodies of staff members who had asked inconvenient questions, destroyed evidence of the weapons trafficking activities, and systematic sanitization that would leave no traces for investigating authorities to discover. The criminal network was implementing total operational security at the cost of anyone who might compromise their continued activities. Felipe made his final tactical move by triggering demolition charges positioned throughout the administrative wing, intending to eliminate both Ava and the communication equipment that had transmitted her intelligence to external agencies. The explosions began in sequence, creating a countdown that would culminate in complete destruction of the facility's most sensitive areas. "You've won the battle," Felipe acknowledged as structural supports began failing around them, his voice carrying the professional courtesy of one warrior recognizing another's superior capabilities. "But the war was already over before you arrived. Our people are embedded in restaurants, catering companies, and food service operations throughout Europe. Tonight's exposure changes nothing." Ava realized that Felipe's final revelation was both threat and confession. The network's true operational structure involved long-term placement of trained operatives in food service positions where they could operate undetected while maintaining access to the logistics infrastructure needed for weapons distribution. The academy had been a training facility, but the real weapons cache was the entire European food service industry. As the demolition charges approached their position, Ava made a calculated decision that would complete her mission while ensuring Felipe's intelligence reached the agency's coordinating response to her transmission. Rather than attempting escape, she activated the room's emergency communication system that would broadcast their conversation to every law enforcement agency monitoring the facility. "Tell them about the restaurant placements," she commanded, her weapon trained on Felipe with deadly precision. "Give them the locations, the operational codes, the command structure. Your network is blown. Help them find your people before more innocent civilians die." Felipe's expression revealed surprised respect for her final tactical gambit. By threatening him with immediate death while ensuring their conversation was being recorded and transmitted, she had created conditions where his cooperation would provide the detailed intelligence needed to dismantle the network's true operational structure. "You're recording this," Felipe realized, understanding the trap she had constructed, "forcing me to provide intelligence that will destroy everything we've built." "The kitchen became my weapons cache," Ava replied with grim satisfaction, "but information was always the most powerful weapon. Start talking, or die knowing your silence accomplished nothing." The demolition countdown continued as Felipe faced the choice between protecting a network that had already abandoned him and providing the intelligence that would prevent future attacks on innocent civilians across Europe. Felipe's decision to cooperate came with the grudging respect of a professional operative who recognized superior tactical positioning. As structural supports groaned under the increasing demolition damage, he began providing detailed intelligence about the network's true operational structure, his voice recorded and transmitted to law enforcement agencies across Europe. "The restaurant network spans 43 cities," Felipe began, his professional demeanor intact despite their desperate circumstances. Each location was selected for proximity to government facilities, transportation hubs, or major population centers. The operatives aren't just trained killers. They're sleeper agents positioned for coordinated strikes against continental infrastructure. Ava maintained her weapon trained on him while monitoring the demolition countdown. Calculating their remaining time before structural collapse would eliminate both of them along with the critical intelligence Felipe was providing. The irony wasn't lost on her. The kitchen that had been her cover was being destroyed. But the information flowing from this room would save countless lives across Europe. Primary coordination runs through restaurant supply companies, Felipe continued, understanding that thoroughness might be the only legacy of his failed operation. Beaumont Culinary Systems, based in Amsterdam, processes orders that contain weapon specifications, disguised as ingredient requirements. Each restaurant receives monthly deliveries that include mission parameters encoded in routine supply documentation. The revelation confirmed Ava's analysis of the network's sophisticated logistics integration, but the scope exceeded even her worst-case projections. They weren't just moving weapons, they were operating a continent-wide sleeper network that could launch coordinated attacks against multiple targets simultaneously, using the food service industry as perfect cover for their activities. The graduation ceremonies were psychological operations designed to make law enforcement believe they had disrupted our primary activities, Felipe admitted as ceiling fixtures began failing around them. While agencies focused on academy raids, our real operatives were establishing themselves in positions where they could operate for years without detection. Through the control room's failing communication systems, Ava could hear coordinated law enforcement response beginning across multiple countries. Her intelligence transmission had triggered the largest counter-terrorism operation in European history, with simultaneous raids being conducted on restaurant facilities, supply companies, and training centers that Felipe's forced confession was identifying in real time. Director Castellina wasn't the network leader. Felipe revealed as structural damage reached critical levels. He reported to a council based in Geneva financiers who viewed destabilization as profitable investment opportunity. The weapons trafficking was secondary to their primary objective of creating market conditions that would benefit their other holdings. The confession exposed the network's true nature as a profit-driven conspiracy that used terrorism and weapons trafficking to manipulate markets and political situations for financial gain. They weren't ideological extremists, they were criminals who monetized chaos while hiding behind legitimate business operations that provided perfect cover for their activities. Ava's communication equipment crackled with updates from law enforcement agencies coordinating response to the intelligence windfall Felipe was providing. Arrest warrants were being issued across 12 countries, financial assets were being frozen, and tactical teams were moving against restaurant locations that served as operational bases for the sleeper network. The Geneva Council includes names you'd recognize, Felipe continued, his voice carrying the bitter satisfaction of someone exposing the corruption that had ultimately betrayed him. Cabinet ministers, defense contractors, banking executives, people who profit from instability while maintaining public reputations as pillars of European society. As demolition charges reached their final sequence, Felipe provided the access codes and communication protocols that would allow intelligence agencies to decrypt the network's operational communications, exposing years of planning and coordination that had operated beneath the legitimate veneer of international business activities. "Why are you giving them everything?" Ava asked, genuinely curious about his motivation for such comprehensive betrayal of his former colleagues. "Because they left us here to die," Felipe replied with professional honesty that transcended their adversarial relationship. Expendable assets protecting expendable operations, while the real leadership escapes consequences. I respect competence yours more than theirs. The structural collapse reached their position as emergency services finally breached the facility's outer defenses, Their arrival coordinated with the international law enforcement response that Ava's intelligence had triggered. Philippa's final transmission included banking codes that would allow authorities to trace the network's financial structure back to its Geneva sources. The kitchen became your weapons cache, Philippa acknowledged as rescue teams reached their position. But you turned our entire network into weapons against itself. Professional work. The facility's destruction eliminated most physical evidence of the Academy's criminal activities, but the intelligence Ava had gathered and Philippa's forced confession provided law enforcement with everything needed to dismantle the continent-wide network. Restaurant locations were being raided simultaneously. Sleeper operatives were being arrested before they could implement emergency protocols. And financial investigations were freezing assets that had funded years of careful preparation, as emergency. Personnel extracted them from the collapsing building. Ava reflected on the mission's outcome. She had arrived at Château Bellmont as an underestimated kitchen assistant, dismissed and mocked by people who assumed her gender and position, made her irrelevant to their sophisticated criminal enterprise. Instead, she had exposed and destroyed a network that threatened the security of every major European city. The kitchen had indeed become her weapons cache, but not in the way her adversaries had feared. By underestimating someone they ordered to stay in the kitchen, they had placed her in the perfect position to turn their own facility against them, gathering the intelligence and evidence that would prevent a continent-wide terrorist campaign. Disguised as culinary excellence. Outside the burning academy. As law enforcement agencies coordinated the largest counter-terrorism operation in European history, Ava Ingrid stood as herself for the first time in months, not as an invisible kitchen assistant, but as the operative whose courage and competence had saved countless innocent lives by transforming prejudice into strategic advantage and proving that the most dangerous weapons are often wielded by those whom others choose to underestimate. 6 months after the Château Bellmont operation, Ava stood in the pristine kitchen of the International Culinary Security Institute, watching a new generation of undercover operatives learn the skills that would allow them to infiltrate criminal networks using food service operations as cover. The institute had been established in response to her mission's revelations, creating the first specialized training program for operatives who could blend into the hospitality industry while conducting intelligence operations. The transformation was remarkable. Where Château Bellmont had perverted culinary education to train terrorists, the new institute combined legitimate culinary instruction with intelligence techniques, creating operatives who could work in any kitchen while maintaining perfect cover for their true missions. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The criminal network's own methods had been turned against similar organizations worldwide. Commander Ingrid called out Agent Sarah Chen, a former military intelligence specialist who was mastering the art of vegetable preparation while learning surveillance techniques disguised as routine kitchen work. The sauce reduction exercise is complete. Should we proceed to the communication protocols hidden in recipe documentation? Ava smiled at the formal address, still adjusting to her new role as Director of Culinary Intelligence Operations. The position had been created specifically for her, recognizing that her unique combination of combat expertise and deep cover capability made her ideally suited to train others in techniques that traditional intelligence agencies had never considered necessary. The Institute students represented law enforcement and intelligence agencies from 17 countries, all recognizing that the food service industry's international scope and minimal regulation made it perfect cover for criminal activities. Ava's curriculum taught them to identify suspicious supply chains, recognize coded communications disguised as menu planning, and maintain operational security while working in environments where a single mistake could expose their true identities. Success of the post-Château Bellmont operations had exceeded every projection. Philippa's forced confession had provided law enforcement with the intelligence needed to arrest 347 operatives across Europe, seize weapons caches worth over 200 million euros, and expose financial networks that had been funding destabilization operations for nearly a decade. Most importantly, the coordinated raids had prevented a series of attacks planned for major European cities that would have killed thousands of innocent civilians. The Geneva Leadership Council had proven more elusive. Their legitimate business operations providing legal protection that complicated prosecution efforts. However, the financial evidence Felipe had provided allowed authorities to freeze assets, disrupt operations, and expose connections that had previously been invisible to law enforcement agencies focused on traditional criminal networks. Admiral Christina Delacroix, the former French intelligence director who now oversaw European counter-terrorism coordination, visited the Institute monthly to observe training programs that had revolutionized how agencies approached infiltration operations. Her presence today marked the graduation of the Institute's third class, operatives who would deploy to hospitality industries worldwide, with skills that combine genuine culinary competence with sophisticated intelligence capabilities. Your methodology has been adopted by agencies across 4 continents, Admiral Delacroix informed Ava, as they observed students conducting a complex exercise that combined advanced knife skills with hidden communication techniques. The Ingrid protocol is now standard training for any operative who might need food service cover. Ava watched her students with professional pride, noting how they moved with the confidence of people who understood that expertise in any field could become a weapon when wielded with intelligence and courage. They weren't just learning to cook, they were learning to transform kitchens into intelligence, gathering centers while maintaining the humility that would allow them to operate undetected in environments where arrogance would expose them immediately. The memorial wall in the Institute's main corridor honored those who had died exposing criminal networks that used legitimate businesses as cover for illegal activities. Sofia Martinez held the position of honor, her sacrifice having provided the crisis that allowed Ava to expose the Château Bellmont conspiracy. Her brother's death in Barcelona had motivated her investigation, and her courage had prevented countless similar tragedies across Europe. Felipe Beaumont's cooperation had earned him a reduced sentence in exchange for continued intelligence about criminal networks operating within legitimate businesses. His detailed knowledge of operational security measures had proved invaluable for training operatives who needed to penetrate similar organizations. The respect between former adversaries had evolved into professional collaboration that strengthened both law enforcement capabilities and criminal interdiction efforts. The Institute's kitchen laboratories buzzed with activity as students prepared for final examinations that would test their ability to maintain cover identities while conducting complex intelligence operations. They practiced scenarios ranging from infiltrating terrorist training facilities disguised as cooking schools to identifying weapons trafficking networks hidden within restaurant supply chains. Most importantly, they learned the lesson that had made Ava's mission successful, that being underestimated could become the greatest tactical advantage when facing adversaries who confused appearance with capability. The prejudices that had led criminals to dismiss her as irrelevant kitchen staff had become weapons more powerful than any equipment she could have carried. As evening settled over the Institute, Ava reflected on the journey that had brought her from dismissed maintenance worker to pioneering intelligence professional. The criminals who had told her to stay in the kitchen had unknowingly placed her in the perfect position to destroy their network, proving that the most dangerous adversaries are often those whom others choose to underestimate. The kitchen had indeed become her weapons cache, but more importantly, it had become a symbol of how courage, competence, and determination could transform any environment into a battlefield where justice ultimately prevailed. Future operatives would carry that lesson into hostile territory worldwide, armed with the knowledge that expertise and integrity were more powerful than any conventional weapon, especially when wielded by those whom their enemies considered. Beneath noticed that the new legacy was clear underestimation had become the foundation for a new type of intelligence operation, and kitchens around the world would never again be safe havens for those who threatened innocent lives.